Hey, Blender Bob here, today wearing a portable blue screen. Today we're going to talk about... It's been like 10 times I've been trying to record this. Today we're going to talk about depth of field, we're going to talk about depth pass and the miss pass. And completely at the end of the clip, I'm going to talk about some stuff that I forgot to mention in my previous clip about finding a job in VFX. So just check it out, important information. So let's start right away. So let's start with something very simple. It's going to get more and more complicated as we go. So in the camera here, I can go in the settings, I can turn on the depth of field. I am in cycles right now, and you can see the background became blurry and the focus is on this one. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can either choose a distance manually here. So if I put 50 meters, it goes all the way to the back, or you can use this little thing here and choose which object you want to focus on. Now I click on this one, but it doesn't work, it goes in front. And that's because Blender uses the origin of the object as a focus point, not the geometry itself. So all I need to do is to set the origin at the center of the mass, and I will get the focus point at the right place. You can adjust the amount of blur that you want, if you want a big depth of field or a small one. To do that, you go back to your camera settings and you change the f-stop. Smaller number, shallower depth of field. I strongly suggest that you take a look at my lens clip if you haven't done it already. The link is in the description and right there. It will give you more information about the depth of field, how it works, the 3 criteria that can influence it, and all this stuff, so go check it out. Okay, so I will turn off the depth of field, and now I'll go here and I will turn on the Z and the mist. Actually, we don't need the mist right now, but I'm rendering it because later we're going to talk about the mist. But for now, we just need the Z depth. Okay, I'm going to do a render. Pass in the compositor, it looks like it's all white and there's no information, but if I scroll around with the mouse, look at the values at the bottom. You can see that everything is over 141, and I got this like 10 billion million here. So it's all there, it's just whiter than white, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Actually, what I can do is to create an exposure node so that we can see the result. So exposure, I will just connect the depth to it here and reduce the value. Now we can better see what's going on. Everything that's in front is darker, and the more you go to the back, the whiter it is. But you should never modify the Z depth pass. You should not play with contrast and values and exposure and stuff like this, because it will screw up the results. Okay, so I got rid of it, and now I'll create a defocus node. So this is how we're going to control the blurriness of the image. So the image goes into image, well that makes sense, and then the depth goes into Z.
Welcome to Conspiracy Theories, I'm Alex Bob. Now let me tell you why there's a little Z at the bottom. I will tell you, it's all because of Steve Jobs. Yeah, Steve Jobs, by the way, he's not even dead. He's living on a private island in Hawaii with Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, and Hitler. No, Steve Jobs, remember, in 2000, he had this campaign, Think Different, and he was putting little microchips everywhere, and he put one into Tom Rosenthal's head. Yeah, and Tom Rosenthal, by the way, his real name is Kevin Smith. You know, like the actor that always wears the exact same shirt, and I have a theory about this too. But let's go back. By the way, he wasn't born in Amsterdam. No. The guy was born on a potato farm in Idaho. Now Steve Jobs put a chip inside his head to think different, and that's why they came up with the right-click select that made no sense at all. And also, they decided to put the Z up. But at the beginning of the computer graphics, you had Pong, and you had 2 little lines, and the one bouncing beam. You only had 2 axes because it was 2D. You had the Y-axis and you had the X-axis. And later, when the computer graphics got better, they added the Z depth, and that's why there's a little Z at the bottom, and that's how it is, and that's my theory. And don't tell me about Descartes, who decided how to create the coordinate system in 16,000 whatever. The guy wasn't even playing video games. And this is my theory, so only my arguments are good and yours are bad, okay? You got it? I'm done.
Now the Blender folks are probably thinking, we invited this guy at Beacon 2022, he's completely insane. Don't worry, I will behave. I will turn on the use Z buffer, and suddenly I get by magic exactly what I wanted. I can change the value of the f-stop if I want a larger or smaller depth of field. That works. But I do have some issues. If I look at the edges of the first ball here, you can see this is like sharp and it's supposed to be blurry. It doesn't work where you have a mix of blurry and sharp in the background. The threshold setting is supposed to fix that, but I haven't been able to make it work. But even worse, the big problem here is that I cannot change the focus point because it takes the camera information here, and that's how it was rendered. If I want to change it to this sphere instead, I have to re-render the image. I cannot just change the amount here, it's not going to work. That's kind of a showstopper for me because it works well if you're doing the entire project in Blender from A to Z and you're the only person doing it. But what if it was rendered by another studio or by someone else and then you need to bring it? You don't know what they use for the lens. You cannot change it. You cannot modify it. If it's rendered in Natron, Nuke, Resolve, whatever, it won't work the same way. So not very good for working in an entire industry. So it's just good for the Blender ecosystem. Now the funny thing here is that if you're in texture preview and you preview your depth of field, you actually get a better result on the edges. Okay, maybe it's me, maybe I'm doing it wrong, I don't know, you tell me in the comments. Now let's take this depth pass and let's try it in other software to see how it's going to work. Now we are in Natron, the Nuke wannabe. So if I input an image in Natron, you can decide if you have a multi-layer EXR, which layer you want to output. So I could choose the Z depth or I could decide the mist or whatever I want. In our case, we want the composite RGBA. If you use a layer contact node, you can see everything that is part of this EXR. And you can see that the mist and the Z depth are red. That's because it's a single grayscale channel and it's always in the red channel. The Z defocus node expects the Z depth to come from another file for some reason. So what I had to do was to create a shuffle node, and in there I just said in the red channel I want the Z depth. Okay, let me go back and recreate the Z defocus node because I want to show you what happens when you just create it. So I will connect my Z depth and my source, press 1 to see it, and you see I got colors here. What is green means it's going to be in focus. What is blue means it's going to be out of focus in the back. So you can turn it on and off the preview like this. And you see, if I play with the focal plane, I can decide where I want my focus to be. Let me turn off the preview color, because that's a little bit annoying. And I will put some blur there. Let's say, I don't know, 10 by 10. And here we go. I added some blur to the image. But it looks like it's only in the back because Natron has a weird way of dealing with the defocus. You have a different setting for the front focus and the background. So you see, if I turn this one on, everything that's red means it's not going to be in focus, and you can play with it and you can adjust it. I don't really see what it does. Let me turn off the preview color because it's a little bit annoying. So here we go. I can adjust the blur that I want in the front of the object. For the edges, we have similar issues that we had in Blender, but we have the refine slider here that we can adjust to fix it. Okay, so Natron passed the test, no problems. Now Fusion has a very weird way of dealing with EXRs. If you drag an image in there, you don't see anything if you try to look at it because you need to go to channel and tell it manually which channel is what. I would have to go red. It's going to be this one here in my viewer combined red, and then same thing for the green, same thing for the red, and same thing for the alpha, and same thing for the Z depth. I mean, seriously, what were they thinking? Now, what if I rendered this into multiple layers? And on top of this, you had the AOVs. I would have the diffuse, the glossiness, the transparency, the normals, the position pass, you know, the whole shebang. How can I deal with this with such a limited range of channels? Maybe it's me, maybe I'm an idiot, maybe I don't know how to use the software. You're gonna tell me in the comments. I know you will. So plan B is to use a script, if you installed it, that will split this image into all the layers separately. So you just run that thing here, it's going to pop up this window here, and you go run and close, or run, and nothing happens. Why? It's because I dragged and dropped my image in there, and that doesn't work for some weird reason. So what I need to do instead is to create a loader node. This is kind of a read node if you want, and this will bring my image in the scene. And you can see that if I go into the settings, it has already set up the first channels automatically. Still not good enough for me. Now if I run the script again, you can see that everything has been separated into different nodes, which is completely useless because if I need to update the version, I would have to do it one by one. So I will give Blackmagic 1 out of 10 for their handling of EXR files. Shameful. Okay, let's keep going. I added a little color correct node to get the image a little bit brighter. I had some color space issues and I didn't want to deal with them. All right, the blur node. So this is the best setting I've been able to get this in focus. So I've played with it a lot. There's not much control that you can do, and you get some issues on the edges here. They're very sharp. There's nothing to fix it. So not working very well. Even in the back, there are some issues here. Oh, you have to make sure that you're using the Z channel also, that you really plugged it at the right place when you do this, right here. All right, now you have a sample button where you can just drag and bring it to the object that you want in focus. So if I drop it here, you can see now this object is in focus, which is great. All right, Fusion folks, calm down, calm down. I know that there's a plugin that apparently does a much better job than the default stuff. I didn't buy it just for the sake of doing a test because I don't use it anyway. But if you have it, if you want to try it, all the files will be available. The link is in the description so you can try it and tell me in the comments how it worked. When you bring a multi-layer EXR in Nuke, you need to tell it which layer you want to use. So you use a shuffle node, and there you can pick which channel you want. In this case, the view layer combined is the one that I want. Next, I create my Z defocus node. In it, I will tell it which layer I want to use as the Z channel. So I don't need to do a shuffle like I did in Natron. Let's take a look at the results. I will select this, I press 1, and bang, it works. And you see I got a little gizmo here, focal point. I just need to place it where I want it. Here you go. Look how fast it is. It's crazy fast. Bang, bang, bang. It's really, really cool. All the edges are perfect. Default settings, everything works great. Look at this beautiful bokeh you have in the back. It's really, really nice. I was gonna say just like Natron, but it's actually Natron who copied Nuke. You can also have a color preview here. So if I go into setup here, you see the exact same thing. Red and blue are blurry, red in front. And you see green is very, very thin here. So I can change the depth of field here, how wide I want it. Right now it's at 1 meter and I can change it to anything I want. So 5, and you see, now I got a 5 meter depth of field. This is in meters. And this is how I tested it. I created a bunch of cubes and I calculated the distance from the camera to these cubes. So you can see that if I drag the focus point on top of the cube here, I get the same distance I had in Blender. Same thing if I bring it all the way to the back, I get something about 25 meters, which is the same. If you look at the metadata of the image that were filmed by the camera, you can get a lot of information. So you can get which kind of camera it was, the size of the sensor, and sometimes you even get the lens information, which kind of lens it was, and the focal distance. You can see on the image in the metadata where the focus was made, and you could take this value and bring it directly into Nuke and you would get the proper depth of field. What's unfortunate in Nuke is that the thickness of the depth of field is decided by a setting called size, and it has nothing to do with the aperture like in reality. So you make the size setting bigger, you get more blur. I love that Blender uses the aperture. You have a maximum also to decide how much blur you want, the maximum blur. Like if you put it too much, it looks ridiculous. So you can adjust this too. There's another feature here. You can see the focal point. You have the X and Y coordinate on screen of this focal point. So you could track a 2D object in your scene and copy these parameters into there, and the focus would track the object in the image. Everything is real scale here. Different ways to calculate the depth of field in Nuke. You want to use direct if you use Blender. This will give you the best results. You can also choose the shape of the bokeh. Do you want a disc or do you want something with a bladed aperture? So you will have like an hexagon or a pentagon or octagon, whatever you want. Tons of settings like this. You have something similar also in Blender. And you also have an image. If you want a specific image for your bokeh, then you can put it right here. Okay, so Nuke nailed it, no problems at all. But you know, that's a simple scene. It's just a bunch of spheres. Let's try it with a scene that's a little bit more complicated. Let's try this scene here. It's a little island I did for a clip I'm working on for a friend of mine. And you can see there's a lot of details here, very tiny leaves. This is a worst case scenario for doing the depth of field in compositing. The plans come from islandscapes that I bought on the Blender market, and the plans are absolutely fabulous. It is spectacular. This is the image I've been working with. This is a version with a depth of field rendered in cycles. And for this one I went to the extreme, so this is quite a challenge. So same setup as before, I create the defocus node. I will change the aperture to 4 and I get this. Well, it looks okay. So let's zoom in to see how it looks like. Now if you zoom in and you see all these little squares here everywhere, that's because you're on preview, so it's a fast way to render it. If you remove it, then you will see the real result. So we get a little bit of ghosting here. There's some artifacts here. Some stuff don't, oops, what's going on here? So yeah, it's not perfect. Let's see on this side here. Now it's a total mess. We don't know what's going on. I tried to play with the threshold back and forth, more or less, and I just couldn't fix it, unfortunately. I will spare you the 20 minutes I fiddled with that thing trying to get it to work. There are so many settings here. And at the end, this is the best I could get. I mean, look at this shape here. Just, what is that? And here it's a big blurry mess. It doesn't work at all. Here it's just absolutely horrible. It's unusable. Resolve didn't do much better. Artifacts everywhere, just not a good result. There are so few settings in Resolve to do the adjustments that it's really hard to get something that works very well. Okay, so let's try in Nuke, see what it does. I don't see anything because, well, I'm not looking at the ZD focus node. I'm an idiot, so let's select it and press 1. Woo! Look at this. Look at the plants in foreground, completely blurry. It works so well. Well, that's a little bit too extreme. Let's reduce it a little bit more. It's just perfect. It just works. And I can decide where I want my focus right here. Look at this. Look at this. It works. No artifacts. It's all good. If I change the focus to a plant in the back, look at the plants in front. They get blurry, but it doesn't affect the background. It's mind-blowing. Okay, now we're going to push it even more. We're going to try with the same scene at night because I want to see how it's going to react with the bokeh. So what I'm doing this time is to create a lot of little spheres everywhere, and they have an emission shader with random colors. The idea is to simulate lights all over the scenes. Some are behind the trees, some are in the middle of the trees, some are in front of the trees. So I want to see how the depth of field will react with these light sources. This is the shader for all the little lights. It's very simple, random, and the factor, and then you create a ramp and you connect it into the emission, change the value of the emission, and that's it. So this is what I got. It's not exactly the result I was expecting. I was hoping to see more of the branches passing in front of the bokeh, but it didn't really happen the way I expected it. Not much better on the Natron side. I do get a little bit of the effect, but it's not that good. Here I got a white dot in the center. So this one is just cut right there by the tree trunk. It's not that good. And they all look kind of boxy. It's kind of similar in resolve. I got here a little bit of the effect I wanted for. Let's move around the image. Maybe I will find something better. Oh, you see now, this is what I was expecting, something like this. It happened in a few places, but you can see also that it's kind of a square effect that happens in the bokeh. So if I play with it a little bit more, maybe I can see more or less of this square effect. Anyway, it's not that good. Yeah, here you can feel the cross effect. And in Nuke, guess what? This is what I wanted. This is exactly what I was expecting. And you see this one, you can see the plants. Well, it looks like there's no anti-aliasing here. That's because the Z-depth doesn't have anti-aliasing. So the only thing you can do about this is to render like in 4K and do the exact same thing, and then you will see the difference. You get smaller pixels, therefore it looks better, and you can also reduce it back to 2K. I've played with the settings even more, and now I get the blurry effect in the back here. So you can see the bokeh going through the plants. It's really, really nice. Of course, if I go back to this area here, you will see that I don't have enough resolution, so I can see all these dots. So again, render in 4K and bring it down to 2K. Okay, so now let's talk about the mist pass. In order to create a mist pass, the first thing you need to do is to turn on the layer mist, of course. Then you will go into the camera and you will set the settings to mist so you can see the distance where the mist is going to go from what to what. So you turn this on here and you will see a line that will appear here with 2 dots at the end. Third step is to go into the world settings, and then you can adjust the beginning and the end of your mist. So if you go here, you have the setting here, mist. This will appear only if you turn it on. If you don't see it, it's because you didn't turn it on in the render layer. So this is from where I want it. I want it from here because this is the first thing I see from the camera. So it's this plant here. And the second one is to decide how far I want it. So I can reduce here the amount, so I could put it to the last tree, I can put it anywhere I want. I decided to put it a little bit behind the island, because after this it's just water, I don't really care. I strongly believe that the mist pass should be set as a per camera basis, because you may have multiple cameras in your scene, and if you set the mist from one angle, doesn't mean it's going to work from the other angle. Now I do my render, and in the viewport shading I put it to mist, so I will see the mist pass. This is what the mist pass is going to look like. It already looks like mist. That's why it's called mist, because it's designed to make mist. And now I can play with the start and the depth, and I can adjust it the way I want it. If we take a closer look, you will see that I get some issues here. Look carefully, you see I got all these points here. What is going on is very noisy. And if I look at the plants in front and the foreground, you will see I get issues also on the edges of this plant. This is because I get a transparency map on these objects. Just to make sure, I flooded a plane with one of the plants that was giving me problem, and you can clearly see on the edges it doesn't work well. I rendered a similar setup in Maya with Arnold, and I don't have this issue, so it's a Blender bug, and I already sent a bug report. The way to use it in comp is very easy. You're going to create a mix node, and in it you're going to plug the color, your beauty pass, and you're going to use an RGB for the color of your mist. So I will make it a little bit bluish just to make it more, colder. And then you use the mist pass and you plug it in the factor. And here you go, you got mist in your scene. You can use a curve node and you're going to put it on the mist right here. And if you play with the curve here, you can adjust the amount of mist that you have in your scene. The grainy effect that you have here is because of the transparency bug that I just reported. Until they fix that bug, the only thing you can do is to add a blur node and try to blur it a little bit, but it's not the best. One thing that's important to know is that when something is in the mist, it becomes also a little bit blurry because the light gets diffused. You can clearly see it here. Look at the edge of her legs compared to her purse. The purse is sharper, but the legs are completely blurry. And that's why you always need to do the mist pass first and then you do the defocus. You could also use the Z depth for the mist if you want to. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. You would need to create an exposure node because if you just look at the Z depth as is, you will see that it's completely white, so there's no details, you don't see everything. So you just connect it to the exposure node, and if you reduce the exposure, you will be able to get something similar to the mist. But you can see the background is completely black. Maybe that's not what we want. So what we want is a white background. I will just create a mix node, just put it right after, and I will click on clamp. I need this to be on the second one, so now I get a white background. If I want to make some adjustments, I can do like I did before. I can create a curve node. So I will just move this away and create my curve node, curve here, and just play with the curve. So I adjust the amount of mist that I want. And now I'm just going to move some stuff around, make it a little bit cleaner. And what I need to do now, instead of having the mist connected to the factor, I'm just going to connect what I just did and see the result. And I get my mist here. Now it looks like crap. That's because of the bug I just reported. The only temporary solution that I could see is to create a blur node right after the RGB curve and just blur the Z depth a little bit. So blur, I'll put it here, put let's say 5 and 5. And so it's a little bit better, but I mean, there's nothing we can do right now. They really need to fix that bug. And as I mentioned before, after this, you need to add your defocus. So you need to do it after you do the fog because you want to blur the fog with it. So I will create my defocus node. I will connect the Z depth on it and use the Z buffer, and that's it. I adjust the f-stop and I'm in business. So the depth pass and the mist pass are very similar. By the way, you should always use EXR full if you do this because you will get more control, you will get a better result. Now, the depth pass is used to create the depth of field. The other one is to create a mist atmosphere. But you can also use the mist pass to create the depth of field. It's still going to work. This will not work in Blender because it uses a distance that's baked in the Z buffer, but in Nuke you can use the mist instead, and you can, instead of direct, you go to depth, and then you can use it and you can change the focal point and it's going to work. The settings are going to be a little bit different, but it's still going to work. Like the focal plane is like a very tiny numbers. It doesn't work in meters like it's supposed to work. And you can see here I got this glow around the plant, and that's probably because the mist pass is anti-aliased and the Z depth is not, and there's a reason why it's not. It's to avoid these artifacts. Okay, so now we've been dealing with the depth, right? But what if we want to do it vertically? Like smoke on the ground or something like this. This is called, well, a Y depth, but in Blender it would be a Z depth, but now it becomes completely confusing. So let's try it a vertical depth or gradient, all right? How can we do this? Well, some software like RenderMan, they already have it in the AOVs. You just click it, it's gonna do it for you. But in this case, we're gonna have to do it manually. And this is how. Okay, now I'm in Maya. Why? Because I wanna show you how it's done in Maya, because I'm trying to do the same thing in Blender and I'm having a hard time. So on my shader, I want to create a ramp, and this ramp I'm going to make it as a projection. It's a planar projection, and in this projection here I can see my ramp. All right, so now you see I got this little green thing here. Hold on, let me catch it here. So I got this little thing, and that's my projection box, and this is where the image is mapped. So it goes from 0 to 1. You can see it fits this square here, and if I scale this projection box, it's going to scale with it. So now I need to adjust the box and I need to adjust the ramp, place it wherever I want it, and I get my Y depth. It's a cheat, but it works. Let me show you the same thing with a texture instead. Maybe it's easier to understand. So this is the projection. If I do it on a plane, you can clearly see how easy it is to do a projection in Maya. And you have many other kinds of projections. You have cylindrical projections, triplanar projections, spherical projections, and they all use a gizmo like this that you can use to really orient your textures properly. And it's very, very nice. And I wish we had something like this in Blender. Note to developers, want it? Please? So I thought I will do the same thing in Blender. I will create a ramp, then I will create my mapping node and my texture coordinates. I will plug it into the fact, and then I will create an object. It's going to be a plane that I will use for my reference projection, whatever. And then I will just use it as an object in the shader, right? Then I will create a new render layer and I will assign the shader as a material override. Now, the big problem with this is that we're using a shader override on everything. So that means we're going to lose the displacement maps and we're going to lose the transparencies. And it may work in some situations, but most of the time, probably not going to work well. It's hard to see anything with a black and white image, so I'm going to put a ramp instead. So now I got this. Why is it like this in diagonal? I played with it, but I was going nowhere and it's really long to render all these planes. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to create a plane in the background. It's going to be much faster this way. Can anybody explain to me in the comments how this thing works to use an object as a coordinate for textures? Because I just don't get it. I scale, it's in diagonal, so if I rotate this, well, then I get something. All right, so this is what I want, but why is it like this? I just don't get it. I don't know how it works. So I will go back to my black and white ramp that I had before. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about Blender, I just don't understand how it works. Why you select an object like a plane and you want to use it as a projection for the coordinates and it just doesn't react the way you want it. I don't understand how it works. If you know, please tell me, I would be glad to learn about it. You see, back in Maya, I had my ramp and I just added a little bit of noise in it and I got this really nice pattern. I could even animate it and make something cool. So this is my Maya Y depth. So I had to mess around in Blender to try to get my ramp in the right orientation, and I played with it until I got something that's kind of decent. I added some noise also, and well, this is what I got. It's not as cool, but it's better than nothing. It's the exact same setup to comp it in Blender. And you can mix both the Y and the Z together to get a really cool effect. Okay, so this is the part where you're gonna hate me. This is the original image. It took 5 minutes 12 seconds to render. This one has a pretty good depth of field on it and it took 5 minutes 11 seconds. This one with a very heavy depth of field took 5 minutes 29 seconds. So it only took an extra 20 seconds out of a 5-minute render to get the real proper depth of field. So why would you want to use the Z depth then? Well, there's a reason for it. First of all, you don't get any artifacts. This is the same thing with motion vectors. If you can render with real motion blur, do it, because motion vectors, it's a cheat and you will get artifacts and it doesn't work all the time. Most of the time, actually, you will get problems with it. So you get a proper depth of field, but in some situations, for example, right now we're working on a movie and part of the story is on a bridge at night. And of course, it didn't build the entire set of the bridge. They just put a section, they just created a section of the bridge and we do the set extension in 3D. Now, because it's at night, we have a shallow depth of field, and it's much easier to just adjust it in comp because it's fast and it's interactive and you can see the result right away. If we do it in 3D, we try something, we send it to compositing, they will say, well, it's too blurry. Send it back, we re-render, it's not blurry enough. And what about if you have a situation where you have somebody like an actor walking towards the camera, the focus is on this guy, but the depth of field will change in the back. So this is easier to set up in comp. So you can really adjust it, you can keyframe it, you can change the focal distance as you do your compositing. Now, about my previous clip I did about finding a job in the VFX industry, there are a few things I forgot to tell you. When you make your demo reel, you need to give a description of what you did in the shot, especially if you have many people who worked on it. So you need to mention, well, I did the animation for this, I modeled this part, this and that. All right, I didn't do it in my demo reel because I'm not trying to find a job. It's just a demo for potential clients to show what the senior staff can do at the office. All right. Another thing, never steal someone else's job. Okay. Never ever do this because it's very tempting sometimes to see some cool stuff and just pretend, yeah, I did this. There's no way to check. Actually, there is a way to check. It's called Google Images. Don't do that. It's bad. It's really bad. One time I had a guy who came for an interview and he showed me stuff that I did myself. And I told him about this and said, no, that's not true because this company did this and I was there and you weren't there. Well, I was also freelancing. So yeah, the guy didn't get the job. Okay, don't do this. Never steal someone else's job. All right, bye.